When a nasty man pushed over a disabled war hero's wheelchair, he expected the royal guard to simply stand there. However, a quick, sharp slap taught him a bigger lesson about respect than any words ever could. This is what unfolded. The noise of breaking glass startled visitors as a nearly finished bottle of beer smashed on the ground near Buckingham Palace's outside fence. "Oi, what are you all looking at?" Brian Cooper's rough voice echoed across the open space. The stink of cheap alcohol and tobacco followed him. He looked like a street fighter, more used to brawls than proper boxing matches. Brian pushed his way through everyone, his old leather jacket and fingerless gloves showing signs of many fights, like his bruised knuckles. He preferred violence over talking. "Look out," he grumbled, shoving a young mum who was a bit slow pulling her kids away. "You're all like sheep, just taking pictures of some bloke in a silly hat." His unfocused red eyes stared at the royal guard, standing very still. The guard's perfect stance and spotless clothes represented everything Brian hated about people in charge. The sun shone on the guard's brass buttons, making Brian's angry look even darker. "Look at him," he said loudly, not really to anyone. His London accent was strong and full of disrespect. "Standing there like he's important. Sarah thinks he's better than us, doesn't he?" The smell of old beer got stronger as he got closer to the guard. The crowd started to feel uneasy, knowing the kind of tension that comes before a fight. Parents moved their kids away, and other people made a bit of space around what was happening. Some teenagers who'd started to film it quickly changed their minds. Brian looked like someone who wouldn't like being recorded. "Oi, soldier!" Brian shouted, now deliberately getting too close to the guard. "What's the matter? Too posh to talk?" His shoes made a scraping sound on the ground as he stood right in front of the guard. "Or are you just afraid? Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Hiding because you've got nothing else." The guard didn't move, but there was a slight tension in his stance, only noticeable to those who understood it, showing years of real fighting experience. But Brian wouldn't have noticed. He was too busy acting tough. "You know what I think?" Brian spat on the floor near the guard's shiny shoes. "I reckon you lot are just—" "Perhaps we should let others enjoy their visit." A calm voice interrupted Brian's rant. Brian turned around quickly, fists ready, annoyed at being interrupted. He saw who had spoken and smiled nastily when he spotted the wheelchair. Here was someone who definitely couldn't stand up to him in every sense. Brian took a few confident steps towards the wheelchair, looking back and forth between his targets. "Well, well, what's this?" he said, his voice full of fake concern. "Someone trying to be a hero?" The war hero sat up straight, even though he was disabled. His lined face was calm, and his medals shone in the sun. Brian didn't know what they were for, but he resented them anyway. "No heroes here, mate," the war hero answered calmly. "Just suggesting we all remember where we are." There was a quiet authority in his voice from facing much worse than street thugs that made some people nod in agreement. Brian's face got angrier. He wasn't used to such calmness, especially from someone he thought was weak. "Oh yeah? And where are we, Grandad? Some tourist spot where we're all supposed to be quiet and respectful?" He turned back to the guard, his voice getting louder. "Look at him, like a statue while we all pretend he's important." The guard stayed still, but there was a new tension. Brian got closer, deliberately pushing limits. "What's wrong, soldier? Can't defend yourself?" His breath made the brass buttons cloudy. "Or maybe you just don't care that I'm right here?" He tapped the guard's chest. "You taking the mickey out of all of this?" People in the crowd got more worried. Touching the Queen's Guard was a big no-no. The war hero's hands gripped his wheelchair's arms, seeing the danger growing. "You're making a mistake, son," the war hero said, his voice full of experience. "That man you're teasing, he's not just for show. These guards are real active soldiers. Active duty? Brian turned back to the wheelchair. More like active duty dress-up dolls, standing around while real people do real jobs. He pointed at the palace. This whole place is a joke, and he's the biggest joke of all. The guard's eyes stayed fixed ahead, but if you looked closely, you might have seen his knuckles go a bit white on his rifle, the only sign of his strong self-control. Tell me something, old man. Brian moved towards the wheelchair, looking more and more threatening. Since you're so keen on defending him, what's it like being stuck in that chair while these soldiers play pretend? His voice turned nasty. Must be annoying, watching someone stand still all day when you can't stand at all, eh? A shocked whisper went through the crowd. The war hero's face stayed calm, though something flashed in his eyes. Not fear, but the patience of someone who'd been through real battles. Young man, the war hero started, his voice steady against Brian's aggression. That uniform represents... I don't care what it represents, Brian shouted, weeks of anger coming out. Look at him! Look at all of this! He waved his arms wildly. Standing there, guarding some rich family's holiday home while the rest of us struggle. And you, he turned back to the war hero, looking dangerous. You roll in here thinking you can tell me what to do. It had got warmer, but people felt a shiver. There was something in Brian's stance now, a coiled-up tension, promising violence. The guard remained unchanged, but the air around him felt electric. The war hero's medals caught the sun as he sat up straighter in his wheelchair. But before he could speak, Brian took another step, his shadow falling over the war hero like a coming storm. I served 30 years in the army, the war hero said quietly, his calm voice surprisingly strong. Lost my legs saving 3 of my men from a bomb. His eyes met Brian's with a steady look. So yes, mate, I think I've earned the right to speak. Brian paused for a moment, thrown by the direct mention of real sacrifice. But like many small men facing their own weaknesses, he quickly covered his uncertainty with more aggression. Army, was it? He sneered, leaning down close to the war hero. And look what good it did you. Threw away your legs for what? So you could sit here defending some bloke who won't even look at you? The war hero's hand stayed steady on his wheelchair's arms. That guard you're mocking, he's not just standing there. He's carrying on a tradition of service that's centuries old, the same tradition that had me and many others willing to give everything for something bigger than ourselves. Everything. Brian's laugh was horrible. Looks like you did give everything, didn't you? And what have you got to show for it? He circled the wheelchair, his voice full of fake concern. Can't even stand up for yourself anymore, can you? The war hero's answer was careful, each word chosen well. Standing isn't what makes a man, son. It's what he stands for. He glanced at the guard, then back to Brian. That's something you might learn if you took a moment to listen. Brian interrupted him, anger flashing in his eyes. Only thing I'm learning is how pathetic this all is. You sitting there talking about tradition, him playing statue like a fool. His voice got louder with each word. And all these sheep, he pointed at the crowd, acting like it means something. The war hero stayed calm, though he seemed to be getting ready for what might happen next. I'd do it again, you know. Give my legs 100 times over for my country, for my mates, for the things that uniform represents. That quiet dignity seemed to make Brian even angrier. He stood right in front of the wheelchair, hands clenched into fists. Principles. Let me show you what I think of your precious principles. The sun made Brian's shadow fall across the war hero's lap. But the older man didn't flinch. Instead, he looked up at his tormentor with something like pity. The fact that you can stand here, freely saying how much you hate everything we fought to protect, that's exactly what we fought for, even if you can't understand it. A muscle twitched in Brian's jaw. The war hero's calmness was annoying him, in a way the guard's stillness hadn't. Here was someone he could hurt, someone who couldn't fight back. Yet somehow he felt like he was losing with every word. Understanding? Brian's voice became a dangerous whisper. Oh, I understand plenty. I understand you're just a broken old man living in the past. I understand that your precious uniform, he jerked his head towards the guard, is nothing but a costume. And I understand. His hands moved towards the wheelchair's arms. That it's time someone showed you both how the real world works. The war hero didn't move, didn't call for help, didn't show fear. His eyes stayed on Brian's, full of a strength that had nothing to do with being physically strong. It was the kind of strength that came from facing real battles, from making real sacrifices, the kind of strength Brian's bullying couldn't touch. But Brian, consumed by his own anger, only saw violence as strength. His fingers tightened on the wheelchair's arms as the sun climbed higher, witnessing what was about to happen. The real world, eh? Brian's fingers dug deeper into the wheelchair's arms. Let's see how well your principles protect you now. His voice had that cruelty of someone who'd finally found power over another, even if that power came from picking on someone vulnerable. The war hero stayed steady, his medals shining. I've faced worse than you, son. Men with real power, real belief. Not boys pretending to be tough by threatening disabled people. That hit a nerve. Brian's face twisted with rage. Playing. He emphasized the word by shaking the wheelchair a little. Does this feel like playing to you? The wheelchair wobbled, but the war hero's expression didn't change. You want to know what real toughness looks like? The war hero asked quietly. It's not this. It's not threatening those who can't fight back. I've seen real courage in the young men and women who put on that uniform. He nodded towards the guard, knowing they might not come home. In the soldiers who carried me out under fire after the bomb, risking their lives to save mine. Shut up. Brian's voice cracked slightly. Just shut up with your war stories and your medals and your... The lad who saved me, the war hero continued, as if Brian hadn't spoken. 19 years old. Could have left me there. The smart thing, really, with the enemy closing in. Instead, he threw himself on top of me when the bombs started falling, lost 2 fingers and got a chest full of shrapnel. But he didn't leave. The crowd had gone completely silent. The war hero's quiet words carried more weight than Brian's shouting ever could. Even some of the people who'd moved away earlier were coming closer again, drawn by the story of real sacrifice. You think that guard's just standing there for show? The war hero's eyes briefly met those of the motionless guard. 3 months ago, he might have been on patrol. 6 months from now, he could be anywhere in the world. That uniform isn't a costume, it's a commitment. Something I don't expect you to understand. Brian's knuckles had gone white on the armrests. Understanding? He spat the word. I understand that you're sitting here defending a system that doesn't care about either of us. Playing soldier didn't do you much good, did it? Can't even walk anymore. And for what? For what? For the first time, real emotion showed in the war hero's voice. For the right of people like you to stand here and mock what you don't understand. For the freedom you're using to threaten a disabled war hero. For every person in this crowd to live in a country where they're free to visit their palace, take their photos, live their lives without fear. Without fear? Brian gave a harsh laugh. Let's test that, shall we? His grip changed on the wheelchair, something dangerous in his eyes. Let's see how brave you are now, old man. How about we find out if those medals help you fly? The war hero's hands moved to cover Brian's on the armrests, not fighting, just resting there. Son, I've already faced the worst day of my life. Lost my legs, lost my ability to walk, but never lost my dignity. Whatever you're planning to do, it won't change that. That quiet dignity seemed to make Brian even more furious. Your dignity? He leaned down, his face inches from the war heroes. "Your precious dignity won't help you when I tip you out of this chair. Your medals won't catch you when you hit the ground. And your toy soldier over there?" He jerked his head towards the guard. "He'll just stand there and watch, won't he? Because that's all he's good for." The war hero's eyes stayed steady, even as Brian's grip tightened. "I'm not afraid of you, son. I feel sorry for you. Because while you're standing here trying to prove your strength by threatening a disabled war hero, you're actually showing everyone here your weakness." Something snapped in Brian's expression. The last bit of self-control, already weakened by alcohol and anger, finally broke. "Weakness? I'll show you weakness." His muscles tensed as he prepared to act. "Time for your last flight, old man." With a savage grunt, Brian pulled the wheelchair backwards, tipping it until the war hero had to grip the armrests to stay in. "Not so dignified now, are you?" He snarled, the wheelchair wobbling dangerously. "Still feel sorry for me?" Several people in the crowd stepped forward, but Brian's wild-eyed glare stopped them. The war hero stayed calm, though his knuckles had gone white on the armrests. "Last chance, old man." Brian's voice became a menacing whisper. Beg me not to do it." When the war hero stayed silent, Brian's face twisted into something ugly. "Have it your way, then." With a violent push, he sent the wheelchair falling sideways. The war hero, unable to stop himself, hit the ground hard, his medals clattering on the stones. The sound was sharp and accusing in the shocked silence that followed. But Brian wasn't finished. As the war hero tried to push himself up, Brian kicked the wheelchair away. It scraped across the stones with a horrible screech, stopping several feet away. "Go on, then," he taunted, standing over the fallen man. "Crawl to it. Show everyone how dignified you are now." The war hero's face stayed calm, even as he lay there, exposed and vulnerable on the cold stones. His eyes, however, held something that made Brian take a step back. Not fear or hatred, but a kind of patience. The patience of someone who knew what was coming. "That uniform you're mocking," the war hero said quietly, his voice steady despite his position. "It stands for everything you'll never understand. Loyalty, sacrifice, the courage to face real battles, not just pick on those who can't fight back." Brian's foot drew back, rage and shame battling on his face. "Shut up! Just shut your bloody mouth!" The foot started its forward movement, towards the war hero's ribs. That's when it happened. The sound of boots on stone, precise, measured, deadly, cut through the tension. The guard had moved. But this wasn't the ceremonial march people came to photograph. This was the controlled movement of a war veteran, each step carrying the weight of real battlefield experience. Before Brian could complete his kick, a white-gloved hand grabbed his shoulder with an iron grip. The guard's other hand caught the war hero's arm, supporting him with surprising gentleness, even as he kept hold of Brian. The contrast was clear. Tender care for the fallen serviceman, unbreakable strength restraining the attacker. "Sir," the guard's voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd commanded men in battle. "Are you all right?" His eyes never left Brian, even as he spoke to the war hero. The war hero nodded, his dignity unbroken despite being on the ground. "I'm fine, son. Just need my chair back." The guard's grip tightened, almost imperceptibly, on Brian's shoulder, making him flinch. The sun caught the medals on both servicemen's chests, one on the ground, one standing, but both carrying the same weight of sacrifice and duty. Brian tried to pull away, his face a mix of fury and dawning realization that he'd made a big mistake. "Get your hands off me, you can't—" The guard's voice cut through his protest. "I believe," he said with deadly quietness, "you and I need to have a chat about respect." His next words carried the weight of years of service, of battles fought and comrades lost. "But first, You're going to watch me help this brave man back into his chair, and then—" the grip tightened further. "We're going to teach you what real strength looks like." With a precision that came from years of military service, the guard helped the war hero back to his feet. Or rather, supported him with a respect that acknowledged both the man's dignity and his injury. The movement was careful yet efficient, born of battlefield experience where you learned to help wounded comrades without making them feel helpless. "Easy does it, sir," the guard said quietly, his grip steady as he helped the war hero maintain balance. There was nothing ceremonial in his movements now. This was pure soldier, the kind who'd carried wounded mates under fire. Brian stood frozen, the guard's other hand still locked on his shoulder with unmovable authority. He watched, trapped, as the guard retrieved the wheelchair with his free hand, bringing it back with the same precision he applied to every aspect of his duty. Each movement was measured, deliberate, a sharp contrast to Brian's earlier violent actions. "Thank you, son," the war hero said as the guard helped him settle back into his chair. His voice carried no shame, no defeat, only the quiet dignity that Brian's actions had failed to strip away. The guard adjusted the veteran's medals with careful fingers, straightening them on his jacket. It was a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes about the brotherhood between servicemen. Only then did he turn his full attention to Brian, who suddenly seemed to shrink under that focused gaze. "Now then." The guard's voice was quiet, but carried an edge that made several onlookers step back. "Let's discuss what happened here." His grip shifted slightly on Brian's shoulders, turning him to fully face the war hero. "Look at those medals, sir. Do you know what they mean?" Brian tried to look away, but the guard's grip didn't allow it. "I don't." "That's right, you don't know." The guard's voice cut through any protest. "That ribbon there. Distinguished Service Cross, awarded for bravery in action against the enemy. The man you just assaulted earned that by saving 3 of his fellow soldiers while under heavy fire." The guard's next words were delivered with the precision of a drill instructor. "The dignity you mocked, that comes from service. The strength you tried to break, that was forged in battle." He turned Brian slightly, forcing him to face the full impact of his actions. "And that uniform you insulted? It's worn by men and women who would die protecting even people like you." The midday sun had reached its full strength now, casting no shadows for Brian to hide in. The guard's brass buttons gleamed, his bearing no longer ceremonial, but rather that of a warrior dispensing justice. "So, here's what's going to happen," the guard continued, his voice carrying the weight of every soldier who'd ever stood watch over civilization. "You're going to apologize to this gentleman. Not because I'm forcing you, but because it's the only way you leave here with any shred of dignity yourself." Brian's face twisted into an ugly sneer, his earlier fear giving way to a final surge of defiance. "My arse, I'm apologizing to some V—" The slap echoed across the courtyard like a gunshot. The guard's white-gloved hand moved with military precision, catching Brian full across the face with enough force to snap his head sideways. The sound echoed off the palace walls, hanging in the air like a bell toll. Brian staggered, his hand flying to his stinging cheek, eyes wide with shock. The guard's posture hadn't changed, still perfectly controlled, still radiating that deadly calm. Only now, there was an edge to his presence that spoke of carefully measured violence, of discipline that could become devastating in an instant. "That," the guard's voice was steel-wrapped in silk, "was for disrespecting a man who sacrificed more than you could ever understand." His eyes locked onto Brian's with sniper focus. "Would you like to try that sentence again?" The crowd had gone utterly still. The slap had been like a thunderclap on a clear day, sudden, shocking, and carrying the promise of a storm. Brian stood frozen, his cheek blazing red against his now pale face, all his previous bravado erased by one precise strike. The war hero hadn't moved or spoken, but there was something in his eyes. Not satisfaction at Brian's punishment, but a quiet understanding of duty being carried out. 2 tours, the guard said, his voice carrying across the now silent courtyard. That's where I learned the difference between thugs and real warriors. His eyes hadn't left Brian's face, which was still blazing red from the impact. You strut around here thinking you're powerful because you can threaten those who can't fight back. But let me tell you something about real power. Brian's hand was still pressed against his cheek, his eyes darting between the guard and the nearest escape route. But the guard's presence was like a wall, immovable, unyielding. Real power, the guard gestured to the war hero. It's sitting right there in that wheelchair. It's in every medal he earned, every sacrifice he made, every moment he spends showing dignity in the face of people like you. Each word landed like another slap. Real power is serving something greater than yourself, something you clearly can't comprehend. The midday sun highlighted the contrast between them, the guard's immaculate uniform and ramrod straight bearing against Brian's now hunched posture and disheveled appearance. More than just physical differences, it showed 2 different kinds of men, one who stood for something and one who fell for anything. I could have you arrested, the guard continued, his voice level but carrying an undertone of steel. The assault on a disabled war hero would put you away for quite some time. But first, his eyes narrowed slightly, first, you're going to understand exactly what you've done here. The war hero finally spoke, his voice carrying neither anger nor victory. The uniform he's wearing, son. I bled for what it represents. My mates died for it. And this young man standing here, he's not just guarding a palace, he's guarding every principle that allows even people like you to walk free. Brian's eyes dropped to the ground, unable to meet either man's gaze. The redness from the slap seemed to have spread, staining his whole face with shame. Look at me, the guard commanded, and Brian's head snapped up, automatically responding to the authority in that voice. But, that chair you mocked, those medals you disrespected. They represent more courage than you'll show in your entire life. And every second you stood here, proving your own worthlessness, this man showed you what real strength looks like. Some of the younger children in the crowd had started asking their parents questions in whispers, but most of the adults stood in respectful silence, witnessing justice being dispensed with military precision. Now. The guard's voice dropped even lower, somehow becoming more threatening in its quietness. You're going to apologize. Not because my hand is itching to teach you another lesson, though it is, but because somewhere in that small, cruel mind of yours, you're going to find a shred of the dignity this man has shown you. Brian's mouth worked silently for a moment, the sting of the slap still burning on his cheek. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. The words seemed to cost him physically, dragging themselves out of his throat. Not to me, the guard said firmly. Look him in the eye. Show at least that much courage. Brian's eyes reluctantly met the war hero's steady gaze. The older man's face showed neither triumph nor anger, only that same patient dignity that had enraged Brian earlier. Now it just made him feel smaller. I'm sorry, Brian repeated, louder this time, his voice cracking. For what I did, for what I said. The redness of his cheek matched the guard's uniform now, both marking different kinds of discipline. The war hero nodded once, accepting but not absolving. Sorry isn't about words, son. It's about understanding. Do you understand what you did here today? Brian's shoulders slumped. For the first time he looked his actual age, young, lost, and trying to cover it with cruelty. I attacked someone who served, who sacrificed. His hand touched his cheek again, unconsciously. Someone better than me. No. The war hero's voice was firm. You attacked what you thought was an easy target. Instead, you found out what real strength looks like. Remember that feeling. Remember that lesson. The guard's presence behind Brian remained unyielding. The police will be here shortly, he stated. Not a threat, but a simple fact. I expect you'll cooperate fully. Consider yourself fortunate. They'll be far more lenient than my colleagues would be. As if on cue, 2 police officers appeared at the edge of the crowd, their presence somehow less commanding than the guard's crisp authority. Brian didn't resist as they approached. The fight had drained out of him, leaving behind something that might, with time and reflection, grow into understanding. The war hero watched as the police led Brian away, his weathered face thoughtful. Only when they had disappeared into the crowd did he turn to the guard. "Thank you, son," he said quietly. "Though I suspect that slap wasn't entirely regulation." The guard's face remained professional, but something like a smile touched his eyes. "Some lessons, sir, require immediate feedback." He straightened to attention, his bearing returning to ceremonial precision. "Will you be all right?" "Takes more than a bullet to shake me, lad." The war hero adjusted his medals, which gleamed once more in the midday sun. "Carry on with your duty. You do us proud." The guard's white-gloved hand snapped up in a crisp salute, not the ceremonial gesture tourists photographed, but the real thing, one soldier honoring another. The war hero returned it with equal dignity. The exchange was witnessed only by those who understood its meaning. As the war hero wheeled himself away, the guard resumed his post. His posture was exactly as it had been before, ramrod straight, eyes forward, the perfect picture of ceremonial duty. But there was something else visible now, for those who knew to look. The steel beneath the ceremony, the warrior behind the ritual, the true meaning of standing guard. Now, some might question why a ceremonial guard would break protocol, risk his position, to defend a disabled war hero. But perhaps the better question is, how could he not? The uniform he wears, the position he holds, the tradition he upholds, all of these exist precisely to protect what that war hero fought to preserve. In a world where strength is often confused with cruelty, and power with the ability to harm others, this incident serves as a powerful reminder. True strength isn't found in targeting the vulnerable, but in standing up for them. Real power isn't measured by how much harm you can inflict, but by how much good you can protect. The guard resumed his post that day, returning to his ceremonial duty with the same precision and discipline he'd always shown. But everyone who witnessed those events left with a deeper understanding of what that ceremony and that duty truly represents. It's not just about standing still. It's about standing for something. What would you have done in that guard's position? More importantly, in your daily life, when faced with the choice between standing idle or standing up for what's right, which will you choose?